the impracticality and whether the irresponsibility of mankind. When did all the leeches get into the definition? Check out, America is in a terrible situation, whether a terrible instinct. We check out Detroit, and whether reason of final pronunciation. No more additional pause there. Whether another and whether also a pause, because there's too many quizzes against us. What is that? That's hyper unpeaceful, guys. Not directly to the the century, whether America is in a horrific situation, and whether there's a Detroit problem, and what does is there any defenders? What's all the joke about? So we have the words and they don't silence. I'm always asked the question whether I have to reply, and that's itself sort of complies. It's a question really that important. Is that really a question needed? They don't work on trying to phrase it properly. As much as there's sort of this free determined, there is a right course. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the word right. Otherwise, the word would be different sounding even. There is already painted a predetermined role. These ones keep fighting against it. Lots of distortion sets, lots of anesthetic spray, and on comparative of hearing, since lots of anesthetic spray is the proper, the more suitable. I've demanded of doing a lot of stuff, and the zombies just simply don't even care about us. These are just gonna hover around fastly, and as if there are any few of those, and as if these weren't given so much opportunities. They're utterly mental ill. The soundness level is quite out there. I'm supposed to be mentioning it on repetition, whether mention a lot in order to get to somewhere. Whether I'm supposed to mention a lot, whether the tumor cancer simply double and triples, and that's me performance. Whether healing performance is under the lots of stacks and enfeeblements and years of training of this compliance. They try to challenge me or whether to checkmate. I'll checkmate those filthy rats. Whether filth was foremarker. And while I suppose I was detaining some children and demanding and answering to demands by the feminazis, which hypocrite and do ruthless so much. Humanoids got a place, whether the Gorms even, whether the Gorms got to place their priority onto something actually useful and actually attends to someone. It's supposed to be a wolf and a few barking person asks a truth-sayer whether goes towards a righteous path and requests and assists, not the sheer amount of difficulties and hazards. This is going to result in the nuclear bombing of the entire 7 billion. It potentially could have been 50 trillion. Supposed to run the planet Saturn, and whether the surface size of such for the tumor cancer to spread. 2 weeks migration, you might reach to the one of continent, you might have 500 continents there. And it will spread in just as fast. Sort of the current capacity sort of lowered it a bit, and there are other factors why it is sort of lowered. Not with our interference, or whether not with us. First of all, this situation sort of wouldn't be there, and it's just sort of another. That's supposed if that doesn't really sort of work. I'm positive I'm 100% quizzed on my grammar and spelling. This is a 7 billion teaching. How could these do this? Choices over greed, and whether choices are pathetic. There's such patheticness. Doesn't want to venture greater. Notice that every single non-Greek person is whether unbeautiful and whether entity, a reason there could be probable change of subject there. Any mediocreist, whether reason, any mediocreist man is something that got much of a more violence there. And even with it's almost unlimited. And whether recent hearing also has, besides with the recent there, it could be hearing medium. For the deception will virtually unlimited. While for righteous path, you are what you present, and you are what you are, and it's often under the light. It seems whether all the alliance supporters, our guys who are majority, those are hypocrites, silent about it, and they're not elegant. They're also lame. So there's not even this mapping, and they wouldn't match to the mapping of how, or the prediction of how some pseudo is the way even works properly. Vati will be directly calm down YouTube. I wouldn't understand calm down YouTube, but maybe you understood. And if it didn't sort of correspond, it's still trying to receive it. Sheer difficulties. What am I supposed to be performing write 100,000 poetries and possibly get this completed, stolen and completed. If I do this, it will be completed. Because they define success, they will be mentioned as completed, and therefore then our guys named as National Socialist, and they go giggles, the police are gonna get you, and you're disposed by your own government, despite the whole place built by you. This 7 billion is morbid and determined to cancel against our guys. And we can already notice the markings at me, and that's perhaps why a lot of our guys don't survive, didn't even reach to this position, because they've been murdered. The equivalent of murder, while me, myself, is not without so much deterrence of whether feeble mental reduction spells. The 7 billion versus us, almost all of the ethnic groups are fake, and a lot can be defied against whether not so logical because it's mental. We have mass manti-spasm entities. We'll be back in 20 minutes. Whether reason the namely of 20 minutes of hopefully one day we can get shotgun and absolutely decimate toward those. It will be an exciting bloodbath, and I do not like how there's still some residue of feeble restrictions. Hopefully I can shake that off after some bit of a rest, whether a bit of a reset, in which countable as probable also, whether also probable from whether to probable also to countable, and whether to countable, and whether to another, and whether to probable also to countable as a bit of a recess there, whether after a bit recess in about 20, and whether namely of whether 20 minutes, the namely of whether after 20 minutes, the namely of whether the namely after, whether after the namely, or whether after namely, and whether after 20 minutes, the namely of I name namely, and there's 100 of others. Each time it's going to be used one, therefore that's the only one out there. It takes me to do this advocate that this sort of passive aggression is so anti-spot. It's not due to some government needs to do this. Can't Nazi push Nazism by insisting there's governments pushing Nazism, and therefore these push Nazism? That's almost like the baseline, actually, and also the much numbered, whether the common of a lot of the Nazism entities may not be traceable indoors, and to also to could be major indoors of the recent mention, whether recent mentions, or whether recent there, whether recent mention, or whether mention, or whether mentions thereof. A similar effect will be on. It will be somehow a distortion node. And it will be, oh, why are you panting, or why are you speaking a certain way? All this from deprecates needs to pick up the English language. This is how they repay. Noticing even mosquitoes may be providing us, whether they're another type of flies, increase our immune system, or whether, because they don't target a toddler, they don't try to do some nerve attack, right? They tend to target where it is minimal damage on comparison. Almost every single creature is supposed to have everyone check. Whether we check, bears are nice, lions are not dangerous. Everyone attains with reason except the 7 billion spasm, mad doctor, and whether factual, existential, whether factual machines hovering around. They're all practically undead. In the case of a lot of the extremists and the Koreans are probably resignable as ghosts, which were robbed of disappointment. By the way, and this kind of as sort of a transportation of a note for the whether reserved for the other medium of whether, and whether also suitable, and whether also suitable for this medium, whether for this medium, whether also suitable for whether recent, and whether for this medium of also suitable of. There's so much to mention, right? Practically, our guys don't even. It's going to take a while before this upload. Like, just help, just protect motherland. What is this? Joseph Stalin would have been alive, and these are hideous humanoids. How could these ever be like this? This is actually the anti-spasm brutalists. They're practically not alive. In the case of a lot of extremism, whether also whether extremists of Goran, they're of probable of whether, and whether another, whether probable of absolutely not here, and whether in certain phases are being undead, factor churning, enforcing its corpse to have a diet, and noticing it's much more algorithmic than me. A lot of these spasm of hobbies to delusionalize yourself is important. They are in a total another place, whether physical constraints, or whether the physical features, or whether physically at the same, or whether at the same similar, or whether the same physical realm. Whether physical realms they are capable of which, whether capable of also to be of, and whether it's capable of also suitable to capable of also to be of, and whether it's capable of also suitable of. porbalbe also could be of, and whether porbalbe could be of. If this trend continues, there's going to be, this is kind of why it's the note. If this trend continues, there's practically whether there's going to be devastating results, whether there's going to be absolute terminations, whether there's going to be exterminations of the mass amount of Nazis, and also possible some of the modernities, vicious puppetists, or whether puppets there, and it will be game shows there. Lots of the entities became ghosts after continuous event of these vast amount of disappointments. We have ghosts around, and we also have Nazis around. In terms of subdivision, whether feminazi belongs to a subcategory of Nazi probable could be. War is coming, guys. Definite. And there's way too much distortion. That's almost everything's painted against me. So that these matter, Dr. Factory Machine, keep its petition. You might be in way tribute towards me. If there's any sort of help and form of assistance, I will gladly, and whether there will be custom based, and whether custom to, whether there will be some distribution of rewards. And in the absence of such, and still being whether Nazism entities will be do as by law would forhold, or whether I'll personally execute this, and whether those will be terminated. Terminated may not subside, and whether be totally different, whether different from uphold, and whether from law. As much as we are sort of individuals, there's private life and sort of more of the governmental, and whether the government-public side, and whether public realms, and whether government-public regions, and whether sections, whether regions, and whether realms, and whether regions, and we attain to common goals, whether there's community guidelines, and also rules, and whether regulations, also practicality, and whether mandatory practice, or whether regulations, and there's the rule of law. It's by law that stuff are supposed to be done. And throughout the journey of this trial, I think I have been tested, and became stronger, and whether sort of transformed in such a way that I'm naturally reflexed to handle this. So sort of like we have a bug out of a community that's immune to certain dark spells, and I'm able to not only absorb, whether be resistant, and whether immune, whether resistant to it, and whether immune, and whether recent, and whether recent just, and whether just, and whether resistant, and whether immune to it, but also with can reflect some of the Nazism inflections instead of the word dark there, and whether the adjectives, and whether also description, whether adjective with description there, whether also amongst other variants of porbalbe, it's also suitable for whether it's porbalbe, it's also to be of this amount of hazards. And I'm one of the few that stand forth and mention it. Where are the humans? Right? What's their priority? What are they doing? Right? Where are the humans? Reason their word can be a ultra, whether it can be a considerable amount, and whether it can be a considerable downplay, whether it can be a downplay in probable also providence, and whether recent providence of, and whether also a providence service of the probable of it also to be of, and whether it's probable, and whether to have one down one ship, whether to have one, whether to have to probable, and whether it's also suitable for the probable of also to be of. Nazism much remains, and we shall continue the progress. The timing of the recent incident, the considered incident, there was a bit odd. It's sort of deja vu, whether backside, or whether sort of external realm sort of predicted, or whether just, and whether sort of predicted. Maybe it's a factor being, whether it's moderate, whether a sign it says, or whether it's moderate, or whether minor, moderate, whether minor factor being, whether a factor being, it's about due of this one, and whether it's mainly from, whether a factor of which come from the recent stacks of the timings of the events, and other abstract terms yet named, and whether yet common, whether yet ready to be steady remarked, and be more to the amongst group side, or whether more to the public group, or whether amongst the group discussions, or whether group side, and whether as the recent of whether recent, and whether instead of. My mention is not entirely sort of inaccurate. They're supposed to see in text, and it rather very matches, but the humanoids do not like it, how it's different from the publicism associated nonsense. We'll keep out the work. We have the nuclear bombs. We can bomb this Zambas's planet back to the before it was hijacked, and whether after some other additional construction, and whether improvements, etc. And whether also terror transformation, whether terraform, and whether there's terraform. Why is English? I'm already speaking at Romanian English. If taken with some more of a recent, so whether I'll come back with a British accent, and there it would reveal, serve as an example of comparison. It's supposed to be in Poland or in Germany or in Russia, we mentioned this, and over there it's soaked with liberalism. How did this total mess come up with? It's such childishness. It's like all the wisdom of the ancient past be forgotten, or whether the history of yesterday was forgotten. History of yesterday is like 20 years ago, right? Forgotten. And they indeed have forgotten. It's not so much after quiz, Jeopardy quiz, and they're prepared for whether a quiz, they doesn't know it. Notice the game Jeopardy. What is that? What is fuckity nonsense fuckery? So what is passive aggression for 500? Passive aggression, blah, 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 privacy, blah, 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 and so slow, and timing with the eerie non-sports, that's utterly no honor. A reason there can be quite a providence. It's better if we directly arrest those. After some certain phases, then it would return to the whether before the Zambasists, and whether also associated liberalism, consumerism, whether it's recent they're just, and whether whether before Nazism and along with, and whether along that's on with, and whether along with, and whether along with, and whether consumerism, or whether also consumer, or whether along that's on with, and whether reasons in whether is it whether recent that's on with liberalism, equality, diversity. Like what kind of pancreas rules that? You're gonna be slow and accept it. Go direct about it. It's an automatic reject. It is something to be automatic about. Should I preach about you, like me dipping some poop and collecting person's poop and put Axe body spray onto it, then dipping the perfume and measure and come up with all these words about it? What is a word? It's mentai. It's like I don't try to kill somebody, I fan them. Come on, man. Pick yourselves up. There's nothing particular wrong with the recent mention there. It's sort of against the academia-ness, which is filled with selfish, anti-mimi gang members, leechicists, which I can personally nuke, probably. Humans. The reason there can be a bit rhetorical expression, name of a reason there phrase can be of a rhetorical expression. Because it's against allegiances, therefore it has a problem. It's not against moral values. It's against terrorism. So the terrorism have a problem against. Terrorism can pose more legitimate than the innocent. They already became more innocent than the innocents, and more legitimate than the civilization's pioneer, whether the cultural pioneer, the representatives. This planet is completely lost in the Zambasists in a way. That's the only occasion probably, and whether one of the few, which the word lost to be used of. While the terrorism simply is I'm innocent. And its action is always on some sort of I'm moving this around. Like what is that? That's insurgency. Sugar terrorism, whether domestic terrorism. These will be military engaged. There's too many of them. I'll personally point a rifle towards those and pang, 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 pang. And execute so many of those. This planet needs to be defended more. If there is any more wussiness or the cowardice, that's bad. Men should stand stronger and try to murder their own mother as a test whether they can do it. So if they indicate then it's out of the spell. Notice the statement of to slap their mother still is within reason. This cowardice is going to cause much more problems. But the cowardice is going to insist and thus slander. So if we got our spell, it is sort of not so much a spell, whether our spell doesn't involve slander, whether it's more of a reason there of parallelism, whether Kant is complete enough and whether reason there parallelism there, not to provide words. I cannot just wolf along the line. Like, why can't I just speak 5 words and these all pretend it doesn't understand? These all understand. These been working on hijacking our mad factual slot machine. These are all like slot machine, ding 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 ding. What are they talking about? All quiz questions. They don't like you. They don't even like life. They don't even know themselves. They're not even themselves. And they neither could be themselves, neither they were themselves. I wish it was a Smeagol converted to more of a golem, then that's actually a golem instead of these Nazi, absolutely fussly entities. Perhaps the result will be much more worse. I may not fully want, at this instant, explain that all, and whether mention it as of quality of, there possibly will be mass of similar to drownings, but it's not really drowning, it's cleansing. Whether erasement, whether termination, and whether recent there, and whether mining instead of. Against lions, against Rohan. But the instance, they insisted that they are against animals. Oh, you name those beautiful ones as animals. You're some kind of mad freak. I'm gonna point a gun at you onto CNN, and I wear an NSA agent uniform and directly gun those onto CNN, whether to the next concentration camp. And what are they going to do? There's nothing that can stop us, sort of before deterrence, because it's set up for testament in the face. I am better than whether I am the one to lead. Notice that I will mention if I am better than something. It's not remotely as dangerous as those compliments even. This is a vicious Nazism planet it became. And whether at the most of the Zambas cesspits and filled with Nazisms, and whether filled with Nazi entities, and with also an entity such as, and lots of Nazism enfeeblements. It doesn't have to really add new enfeeblement. You just have to renew the stack. The stack of this whole stuff came from school. They're mentally fucked. Whether they're mentites. Throughout the way, it's clearly a prison, and it calls it school. What the heck is that? That's like me shipping them to ovens and call it candy bar. Would I really actually have done it? Right? These are utterly menti, and in a way, it's almost like liberated from having to attain and actually work properly. And now they gain the maneuverability of going about the words that even have to match what it is. And the freaks, well, then Sue end, for they had betrayed certain forces for too long. And whether recent just and whether for this criminality something will catch up to them, whether for operating this Nazism. The reason because it's sort of downplays not all of the cases that are comparative, and whether to compare to some of the more severe, whether to some of the more Nazism, or whether to even the moderate, and whether the medium moderate, and whether to the usual cases, and whether to the average of the usual cases, and whether to the average of can be quite a light case, or whether it can be considered as whether it's considered quite a prominence. So therefore, that's whether recent, and therefore that's it was they're made out both besides and whether both besides and whether both a bit of sort of not a lot of the cases, whether it's one of the whether it's considered as of sort of not identifier case of the Nazis, or whether it's sort of a providence case. For that, what reason, and whether reasons had, whether for those two, whether for that, and whether for the reasons of, whether for their, and whether for that, and whether for their reasons of.